can say Plato and Xenophon, both biographers, met Socrates in his late 60s. But what do you say about Aristophanes and why he depicted a false image of Socrates in his play Clouds? I mean, what is the reason behind it when he was one of the close friends of Socrates, as we can see from the writings of Plato?
Well, it's not clear that it is a false image. So it's a comic play, and the main character of Aristophanes' Clouds is a character called Socrates, who is a boffin. He's a scientist. He's someone who is keen to explore empirical knowledge. Of course, in a comic play, that might include things such as telling us that the eruptions of the clouds are the gods farting. It doesn't mean that that's what Socrates actually believed, but that Socrates had made some attempt to give scientific explanations for what was seen as supernatural events. I mean, why do the clouds create rain? What is thunder and lightning? So these things can be explained in semi-humorous ways, and that's what Aristophanes says Socrates is trying to do. What he depicts, though, is a character who is keen on a scientific method that, let's face it, in the 5th century BC hadn't really had any purchase. It took Aristotle a century later, and even then, it took many millennia before the scientific method was the empirical scientific method was well and truly believed in. So Aristophanes is painting a picture of Socrates as someone who's interested in these kinds of novel methods of talking about, say, natural phenomena, which to an average Athenian had a divine dimension. And therefore, Socrates comes across as someone who doesn't believe in the traditional gods. And that may have been one of the reasons that was one of the accusations that 24 years later, in 399 BC, was leveled at him. So this is 423 BC when Aristophanes produces the Clouds, and Socrates at that stage is a 46-year-old man. And he is known he's known by Aristophanes, who, as you say, from Plato's Symposium, appears to be a close friend of his, or at least, a good acquaintance. He is known to be someone who pursues these strange and possibly slightly disreputable scientific investigations. He's also someone who seems to deny the reality of the Greek gods, the actual existence of Zeus and Hera and Apollo and so on. And he's someone who teaches those in his school to argue a case that may be wrong, but still win it. So it's implied that he is an eloquent and not particularly moral teacher of argumentation, rather foul argumentation or false argumentation. Now, why does Aristophanes paint that picture? Partly, I think, because that was the image that his audience, the Athenian audience in the 420s BC, would have had of people like Socrates, teachers of various kinds of expertise who are known as the sophists. And we know that there were these individuals who came from all over the Greek world. They came to Athens and they taught, on the whole, elite youth. So this was the only kind of higher education that well-educated young men would have got, having been through their schooling and learned to write and to sing to the lyre and to repeat the great poetry of Greek, classic Greek lyricists and so on. These young men would then find these itinerant teachers who were immensely popular as educators because they said, we can teach you the art of warfare or the art of grammar or the art even of medicine, say. And these people who are called the sophists, which really is just a word meaning experts or professors of their subjects, were all lumped together as people who seemed to be teaching things because they were able to articulate them rather well. There wasn't necessarily a belief that they really had the truth, but they could argue very well. So take medicine, which in those days, of course, was not really a very advanced discipline in terms of its scientific basis, but you had the doctors going around saying, this is how you should cure X and Y. How do you know? Because they're persuasive. That is their stock in trade, their ability to persuade. How do we know that these people who are telling you that this is the art of warfare are any good? Because they're very persuasive. So there was the sense that the sophists could persuade without really knowing the facts. Socrates was lumped in with them because there are all these very clever men going around who are clearly very eloquent. And that's something that Socrates was. He could argue the hind leg of a donkey, if we are to believe the kind of thing that we read in Plato's dialogues. And so inevitably, he was seen as one of those sophistic types. And he was also a very odd-looking man with bulging eyes, and certainly, in his 40s already, he presumably had quite a physique, having fought in many wars, and possibly being quite bruised about the face. Some of the later depictions we see of him is this bruiser of a man, actually. And so he would have been quite a useful butt for a comic play. And that's what I think happens. But I think Aristophanes does preserve some key truths about Socrates, which is that he was known to have been interested in scientific phenomena. And he was known to have been a rationalist in his style of argumentation. And I think we have to take all that seriously, even if much of the way in which it is presented in Aristophanes is entirely comedic and humorous.